All right, folks, let's get started. Let's jump right in. We all know what happens over the weekend. Israel strikes Iran's nuclear sites and kills top generals. Iran retaliates with missile barrages. So here comes the post 9/11 media slant. What this headline should read is Israel launches completely unprovoked strike on Iran, killing several civilians, 128 over the first 2 days, Friday, Saturday. That's now up to over 400 casualties. But the AP frames it, they struck their nuclear sites and their generals, and Iran retaliates with missile barrages. Welcome to 2003, everybody. I hope you're ready. Israel launched blistering attacks on the heart of Iran's nuclear and military structure Friday, deploying warplanes and drones previously smuggled into the country to assault key facilities and kill top generals and scientists. Israel asserted the barrage was necessary before its adversary got any closer to building an atomic weapon, although experts and the U.S. government have assessed that Iran was actively working on such a weapon before the strikes. You know what they were also talking about? A deal. We were also amid negotiations. It doesn't get more unprovoked than that, folks, to strike while diplomatic talks are ongoing. Iran retaliated by firing waves of ballistic missiles at Israel, where explosions flared in the skies over Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and shook the buildings below. The Israeli military urged civilians already rattled by the earlier wave of missiles to head to shelter as missiles damaged homes and killed 2 people. Once again, over Friday and Saturday, over 100 Iranian civilians were killed. That number is now up over 400. But the AP makes a point to not mention that at all. Yeah. They mention the 2 Israeli casualties. Like I said, folks, it's going to be a long ride here. So I hope you guys are ready.
Worthy and unworthy victims.
That's right. Exactly. So we have to play this again. This is a relevant piece of video. Most of you have seen this already, so bear with us. But it bears a repeat viewing. Here is General Wesley Clark in 2007 revealing that in the days and months after 9/11, he was informed by top brass at the Bush administration that the plan was to topple 7 countries in 5 years, ending, of course, with Iran.
After 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Finishing off with Iran, that's right. The only problem, of course, is that Iraq, the first on the list, didn't exactly go as planned. And here's Donald Rumsfeld ginning up support for the Iraq war, promising that they have what? Weapons of mass destruction. Does this sound familiar in 2025 when we were told Iran is just a week away from a nuclear bomb? Let's see.
We know they have weapons of mass destruction.
We know
they have active programs. There isn't any debate about it. So the idea that if you had an appropriate inspection regime, that they'd come back and say you were wrong is so far beyond anyone's imagination that it's not something I think about.
wasn't beyond Scott Ritter's imagination. Wasn't beyond his imagination. That's for sure. But Donald Rumsfeld assured us now famously that the Iraq War could last 6 days, 6 weeks. I doubt 6 months. Very, very confident that all would go well. But of course, we all know it did not go well. And if you look at George W. Bush's job approval rating right after 9/11, right up there at 90%, look at a steady decline as that war in Iraq that was supposed to last 6 days, 6 weeks, maybe 6 months, dragged on year after year after year in horribly bloody fashion. And he left office with just a 25% job approval rating. So Obama wins. And of course, Obama does a lot of horrible things to expand the military footprint. But one thing he does do that would complicate that list that General Wesley Clark was reading off is he reaches an Iran nuclear deal. Limits on fuel would lessen with time. That brings us to 2015, when Donald Trump takes his ride down the escalator. And over the next year, he has this very unlikely ascendancy to the presidency. According to MSNBC, that ascendancy came with the help of Russia, which is not exactly true. Close, but no cigar. No, he was actually colluding with Israel. There was a huge write-up by James Bamford in The Nation magazine, the Trump campaign's collusion with Israel. It even got the cover story on that print. The Candidate and the Spy was the name of that edition of The Nation magazine. And so here is James Bamford on Democracy Now! In 2023 talking about how, yes, Trump was aided and abetted in 2016 by a foreign power. It just wasn't the foreign power that the media thought it was, or rather, wasn't the foreign power that the media wanted to admit it was. They knew full well that the collusion was between Trump and Israel. And, of course, they did not collude with Trump to win him the White House for no reason. There were strings attached. What do you think those might be? Well, let's take a look at this. A few minutes, but it's definitely worth watching because I know probably most of you haven't seen this. This story got very little coverage at the time. Why do you think? Because it's an indictment of both the intelligence agencies and the media. But here it is.
And why we know a lot. Talk about what happened, why we know a lot about Russia, or at least a lot is made of and going after Russia, saying it tried to overthrow the 2016 election or spin it for Trump. What actually is documented here is Israel's involvement. And yet Mueller report, Senate Intelligence Committee, it looks like they knew, but just didn't want to talk about it.
Well, exactly. The documents I got are from the FBI. There are the FBI affidavit about this. There's documents, numerous quotes from the secret agent, Israeli secret agent sent by Netanyahu, talking about the PM, which the FBI agent indicates was the prime minister, and lays out a months-long plot, basically from May of 2016 till the fall of 2016, right up to the election. This was investigated by the Mueller team. It was the Mueller team, the Mueller FBI agents who actually got a search warrant for the secret agent's communications. And that's what these documents are. These are the basis of that investigation from the FBI and the Mueller team. But all this was redacted from the final Mueller report. All they focused on was Russia, and in the end, they basically gave Russia a bill of health. They said that there was no collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. They left out a little bit from the report, and that's that there was collusion, but it was from Netanyahu and Israel to the Trump campaign, and it went on for months and months, and involved providing the Trump campaign with secret access to the information that the Russians were picking up from Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC. In other words, the Israelis, they have a very, very sophisticated eavesdropping organization, Unit 8200. It's their equivalent of the NSA. And they were eavesdropping on the Russians and eavesdropping on Wikigate, and Julian Assange, and they were picking up all this information that the Russians were getting from the Clinton campaign and the DNC. And rather than giving it to the President of the United States, to Obama, which is what an ally is supposed to do, especially one that gets $4 billion a year. They instead were giving it to the Trump campaign, secretly giving it to the Trump campaign in order to get concessions.
In order to get concessions. So a lot he said there. We're going to take a quick game break there. So this reporting is sourced from text messages between the Israeli liaison and Roger Stone. Now, Roger Stone, a dirty trickster going back decades all the way to the Nixon years, very intelligent and mischievous political operative. And so he was getting Russian dirt. It's not that the Russians weren't gathering dirt. It's that the Russians were not the ones colluding with the Trump campaign. The Israelis were taking the Russian information and giving it to Roger Stone. And there's no doubt in my mind that Roger Stone, evil genius that he is, knew that as long as he went through Israel, he would not be caught. He would get away with it because he knew that the media, nor any of our bought and paid for members of government are ever going to want to admit that Israel meddles illegally in our electoral process. So he figures, hey, I can get Russian dirt through Israel. If I get it directly from the Russians, they're going to blow the whistle on that because Russia bad. If I go through Israel, I'm going to walk out of this squeaky clean. And that's what happened. He ended up getting away with it. Now, of course, Israel did not do this for free. So they demanded some concessions in exchange for helping Donald Trump win the presidency. Let's see what those concessions were.
From Trump when he became president, and hopefully they were going to help make him president.
Let's talk about that moment, why this was so critical for Netanyahu. Talk about the quartet, the direction Obama and the quartet were going in, and why Netanyahu wanted Trump to win.
Well, a key reason he wanted Trump to win was because Trump vowed to throw out the nuclear agreement with Iran.
See, it's starting to make a little sense, is it now, folks? They helped him win so he would throw out the nuclear agreement with Iran. And why might he want to do that? Well, I think we got our answer this past weekend, did we not? But that's not all.
That the Obama administration worked very hard on and was very useful to the United States. And Netanyahu didn't like it. He didn't want it. He wanted Trump to get rid of it, and Trump was planning to do that. But he wanted a second thing, too. The Obama administration was putting a great deal of pressure on Netanyahu to work out an agreement with the Palestinians over Jerusalem, which was divided. The final agreement over Jerusalem was going to be divided between the Palestinians and Israel. Israel wanted, Netanyahu wanted the entire city to be Israeli. And so they were putting pressure on the Trump campaign saying, look, this is what we want and we can help Trump get elected, but we have to have basically have to have an agreement that he's going to help us on this issue over the sovereignty of Jerusalem. And in the very end, that's what happened. There was a secret meeting, or at least a private meeting, in the Trump penthouse in New York, just between Netanyahu and Trump. And after it was over, Trump came out, and that's what he said. He said that if I'm elected president, I'm going to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and declare Jerusalem the capital of Israel. So the Israelis got what they wanted, and Trump got what he wanted, and the American public was screwed in the meantime.
Yeah, seems like that's the way it all went down. Sure seems like that's the way it all went down. Trump was propelled to the presidency, not by the Russians, but by the Israelis in exchange for those two pretty big favors. Agitate with the Palestinians by moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and, of course, agitate with the Iranians by scrapping that pesky nuclear deal, which is going to make it very hard to justify a war against that seventh country that the United States always had on its list. So Trump's first term comes and goes. He was supposed to win a second, but the blue team of the New World Order got their way with the pandemic, and they got Biden in. But during what should have been Trump's second term, of course, October 7th happens. And in February of 2024, this great article was published in The American Conservative, of all outlets, saying, beware the Iran Pearl Harbor moments. That's right, the Iran Pearl Harbor moment. And the subtitle, the font is a little small, but it says the horrors of October 7th are being subordinated to a foreign adventure project decades in the making. Wow. Based and red-pilled from the American Conservatives' Kelly Bokar Villejos. Not bad there. So what Pearl Harbor is she referring to? Well, she's referring to the previous Pearl Harbor of September 11th, which was warned about in advance in a redacted but largely declassified memo that the State Department received in the months leading up to 9/11. Bin Laden determined to strike in the United States. That got ignored by accident and for no reason. Of course, we all know that. Just as Israel ignored knowledge of the October 7th plan going back more than a year before the date of the events. Again, by accident and for no reason, I'm sure. The American Conservative writes, in 2000, the year 2000, the Project for a New American Century issued a report that proposed establishing a new U.S.-led security perimeter across the globe to protect Western interests and perform the constabulary duties associated with shaping the security environment in critical regions. See, that's how they got away with it, because no one knows what the word constabulary means. You just use, $64 words, and you can get away with whatever you want.
Does that mean vote Trump?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That's what that means. Constabulary. Vote Trump.
The report, Rebuilding America's Defenses, which suggested billions more in the Pentagon budget annually for reimagining military capabilities across the forces, including nuclear and space, was based in part on the defense policy guidance crafted by Paul Wolfowitz and Dick Cheney during the George H.W. Bush administration, quote, for maintaining U.S. preeminence, precluding the rise of a great power rival, and shaping the international security order in line with American principles and interests. The report noted that the process of transformation that PNAC, Project for a New American Century, envisioned, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing events like a new Pearl Harbor. Yes, this was pre-9/11, of course. They said we cannot fast-track this process absent a catastrophic and catalyzing event. Yes, folks, this is all real. It's all real. PNAC, which was founded by Bill Kristol and Robert Kagan, had been actively lobbying to remove Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein from power, got its Pearl Harbor a year later. Within 2 years of the September 11, 2001 attacks, the U.S. invaded Iraq, saw Hussein executed, and was well on its way to fulfilling at least one top-line goal from rebuilding America's defenses to fight and decisively win multiple simultaneous major theater wars. Of course, as we just went over, and as most of us know, the winning part never happened. Yet the centrifugal force that was the neoconservative project, which placed several of its founders and signatories at the levers of political and military power inside the George W. Bush administration, George Jr., Cheney, Wolfowitz, Don Rumsfeld, Elliott Abrams, Paula Dobryansky, and Scooter Libby, was able to perpetuate a global war on terror and a U.S. military footprint across the greater Middle East and Africa that remains to this day. Why revisit this now? Well, you got your answer this weekend once again. Despite their discredited handiwork overseas, vividly reflected, in the vulnerability of 3,400 U.S. troops left over from counter-terror operations against ISIS, a militant group created in the vacuum from PNAC's vaunted Iraq regime change, neoconservatives and their aspirations are still at the very center of today's foreign policy debates, and they really, really want the U.S. to go to war with Iran. You have to figure out which Iranian leaders are making the decisions, and you take them out. The GOP presidential candidate Nikki Haley said following the drone attack on 3 U.S. Army troops stationed in Jordan on January 29th. That was 2024. This wasn't a one-off. Haley, who shares mega donors with AIPAC, has been neocon friendly since her days in the Trump administration when she helped kill the Iran nuclear deal. Don't forget, Nikki Haley did serve under Trump in his first term. Easy to forget that since she recently became hostile to him when she thought she could beat him for the nomination. The Biden administration may choose not to retaliate in a big enough way as to set off World War III. All signs this week thankfully point to an effort on both sides, Washington and Tehran, seeking to tamp down the prospects. This is no thanks to this pernicious army of the Iran-obsessed who implicitly regard the October 7th Hamas attacks in Israel as the Pearl Harbor for the final confrontation, if not the regime change they have long been seeking. That's right. And what are they going to use to get it? Well, the same line they used to get us into Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction. Here's a long history of the lie that Iran is just around the corner from getting a nuclear weapon.
Months to enrich enough nuclear material for a single nuclear weapon.
United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken is warning that Iran is potentially just months away or less from nuclear breakpoint.
Iran is 2 months away from a nuclear weapon, and it's a victory to get them 1 year away?
Iran could be less than a month away from building a nuclear weapon.
Netanyahu has made 2 tough-talking TV appearances, saying that Iran is just months away from making a nuclear bomb.
What is important to understand is that you have to dismantle the entire terror empire, and especially before its main practitioners, the terror states of Iran and Iraq, acquire nuclear weapons. And this, I think, has been a wake-up call from hell. It is telling us, you have the power now to act.
All right. As Caitlin Johnston says, with good reason, there's absolutely no excuse for buying into the war propaganda about Iran after what we all saw with Iraq. Oh my God, nuclear weapons? Shut up, idiots. Yes, amen. If you're a grown adult with internet access still swallowing this load of bull spunk in the year 2025, you're either stupid or evil. Hear, hear. Now, what about Donald Trump, though? He's supposed to be America first. He's supposed to be the peace president. So what does he mean, America first? This sure doesn't seem America first. Well, according to the Atlantic magazine, Trump says he now decides what America first means. So shout out to Adam on Twitter for finding this. So when the author of this piece writes, when I caught Donald Trump by phone this morning, the president wanted to make one thing clear. America first means whatever he says it does. This is a quote from Trump. Well, considering that I'm the one that developed America first, and considering that the term wasn't used until I came along, I think I'm the one that decides that, Trump told me. For those people who say they want peace, you can't have peace if Iran has a nuclear weapon. So for all those wonderful people who don't want to do anything about Iran having a nuclear weapon, that's not peace. Oh, talk about a rug pull. I call this the biggest scam in modern political history, perhaps surpassing even Obama's hope and change. That's exactly what this was. Going back to that escalator ride in 2015 when we thought, and I include myself, I speak for myself in this, thinking that Donald Trump was the more anti-war choice that fall. Because, of course, Hillary Clinton had been agitating for a war with Iran via Syria and Russia by calling for a no-fly zone. And we thought, that's crazy. That's insane. Donald Trump, for all his faults, isn't going to do that. Well, no, he's going to get you there the other way. They presented you with a false choice in 2016. Just like George Carlin said, Americans are made to feel free via the exercise of meaningless choices. You don't have real choices in this country. We never had a real choice. Donald Trump, it is my contention at this point, was an Israeli op from day one. He was propelled to the presidency to shred the Iran deal in the first term, move the embassy in the first term, to get tensions escalating, and then in the second term, October 7th, and now the subsequent genocide and the expansion of the Greater Israel Project, culminated, of course, in the war with Iran that very influential people in our government have wanted, not since George W. Bush, since George H.W. Bush. Since George H.W. Bush. And Donald Trump was just a chump and a pawn in this game all along, as were everyone who thought he represented something different. And I'm not saying this to lecture people. I thought he represented something different. I never loved what he represented. That's why I never supported him. I never voted for him. But I thought he was a disruptor. I thought he was something different. No, he's just getting you to World War III, a slightly different route. That's all this was. That's all this was. This was a giant scam, a giant boondoggle. And yeah, I know the U.S. had nothing to do with the attack on Iran tonight. If we're attacked in any way, shape, or form by Iran, the full strength and might of the U.S. armed forces will come down on you at levels never seen before. However, we can easily get a deal done between Iran and Israel and end this bloody conflict. There's the talking out of both sides of your mouth. All it'll take at this point is for American troops to get attacked somehow, perhaps by Iran, perhaps by Israel saying, oops, Iran hit you. What are you going to do now? Seems like a pretty volatile situation. I know Ken Klippenstein, Reuters reporting Trump vetoed an Israeli plan to assassinate Iran's leader. Oh, look, he tried to stop it. He tried to stop it. He really is. He really is the peace candidate. Well, let's not forget this, folks. Axios reporting Trump was publicly pretending to oppose an Israeli attack on Iran. 2 Israeli officials claimed to Axios that Trump and his aides were only pretending to oppose an Israeli attack in public and didn't express opposition in private. We had a clear U.S. green light, one claimed. The goal, they say, was to convince Iran that no attack was imminent and make sure Iranians on Israel's target list wouldn't move to new locations. Once again, they assassinated them in their homes. Netanyahu's aides even briefed Israeli reporters that Trump had tried to put the brakes on an Israeli strike in a call on Monday, when in reality, the call dealt with coordination ahead of the attack, Israeli officials now say. The Americans, of course, deny this. You say, who do you believe? The Israelis are pretty massive liars, comparable to just about everyone on earth, except, of course, for us. We lie a lot, too. And given the events of the past few days, it sure seems like they're telling the truth in this instance, that we had their back all along, and all of this posturing was just bullshit to lull Iran into thinking that a deal was possible throughout these various rounds of talks. So there you have it. That's the timeline of how we got here. And the only way to stop this now is for everyone to stand up and say in one voice, we are not dying for Israel. We are not sending our children to die for Israel. Period. The American public is clearly against this, as we're going to learn later in the show. MAGA is very divided on this, with a majority of the rank and file being against this, obviously. And if we simply say we're not going, policy can change at that point. Notice ISIS stopped raiding workplaces. Now, they say it's because the employers got in Trump's ear. That's bullshit. The employers have been scared about this for years. That's why Trump backed them on the H-1B visas. The reason ICE is stopping raiding workplaces is because they can't have Los Angeles everywhere, right? They just can't have that. That leads to a complete shutdown of the system. So when people get out in the street and they make their voices heard, that we're simply not happening. Simply not happening. We're not dying for Israel. Our children are not dying for Israel. This supersedes everything else. This is now a global emergency, decades in the making. If this does not stop, the results are going to be catastrophic beyond your imagination. Iraq was a horror. This will be much, much, much worse. And if you don't believe me, read Tucker Carlson's Twitter feed. He says that exact thing, and he's right. This will be much worse. Much worse. And so we all just have to say in one voice, whether you're MAGA, whether you're a liberal, whether you're a communist, whether you're this or that, no war with Iran. That's the only thing that could stop this at this point, and it can stop it. It can stop it. But it's going to take everyone getting on the same page right now.
Yeah, what we really need is for Rachel Maddow to go on the air and do one of her squinty eye, smarty pants monologues about how Trump is an Israeli op. This is beyond partisanship. This is beyond
exactly,
Democrat and Republican. If the presidency is an Israeli op, that is so huge.
Right.
She needs to do one of those to bring the libs on board. I must say, I have been heartened. We have actually gotten quite a few comments saying, you know, I thought you fellas just had that there Trump derangement syndrome, but you know what? You're all right in my book.
Yep.
So a lot of folks coming on over. And yes, when it comes to nuclear irradiation, everything else kind of goes out the window, guys.
Right.
We need to come together. We need to come together. You know what? Let's hold off on fighting about whether Sue Storm should be the leader of the Fantastic Four. Right? That can wait. That can wait. We can all get together, woke, anti-woke. You know, we're as the great Roger Waters said in his anti-nuclear war song, "Ashes and diamonds, foe and friend, we were all equal in the end." Because that's what's going to end up happening to us if we do not set aside our differences to prevent nuclear war. We always thought it was going to end this way. We didn't. I mean, the Trump, not the World War III part, but that MAGA was going to collapse because it was very clear from Trump signaling, from his actual words, and from the collection of amoral assholes, warmongers, losers, and maniacs that he put in his cabinet, that this was exactly what was going to happen. It's just kind of amazing how quickly it did. And this is something we have always said. Unlike the libs, MAGA will challenge their leadership and the narratives of their leaders, and you're seeing that. We'll see that in the segment later. Like the libs, it would not matter what evidence you showed a lib that would indict their leaders, their most beloved, sainted figures. There's absolutely no way they would ever turn on them. It really. I mean, we did show them evidence. You show them Citibank picked Obama's cabinet. Cat stare, as you say.
Genocide under Biden.
Genocide under Biden. None of it ever made any difference. Kamala Harris locking up people for smoking pot, laughing about locking up parents for truancy, fighting to keep a man from having a DNA test that would exonerate him. None of it ever made an impression on the libs. MAGA, yeah, man. I mean, they've turned pretty quick. Like the only ones I see now supporting this are the influencers whose bread and butter depends on them somehow selling this. Because to turn around now and turn on the Trump administration, you got to remember, as we demonstrated in the Tim Dillon segment, a lot of these people are getting paid the other way. They're getting paid from the deep state. They're getting paid by the people behind Trump. They can't just say, well, I'll shift to my audience taste. Bringing along the audience is their business model, but the money's not coming from the audience. The money is coming from people you're not even seeing with a lot of these MAGA influencers. Otherwise, they would just turn around, right? And they would say, what the hell? This isn't what they're working so hard to try to reconcile their audience to this. Why do you do that? What do you do that for? You do that because you're not really somebody in the business of speaking truth with an audience. You're in the business of propagandizing a base to get them to go along with an agenda without that audience really being aware of who you work for. That is the case with a lot of these people, as we have seen more and more. And again, very quickly, within 5 months, a lot of people are getting exposed. So yeah, man, this is a time we need to all set things aside, come together, and work to stop this war.
Please clap.